The cold splash hit without warning. Water burst over her head, soaking the brim of her faded gray cap and running down her neck. Her t-shirt clung to her body within seconds. The floor beneath her sneakers turned dark, with spreading puddles, one slow drip after another echoing through the quiet, fluorescent-lit lobby of the Westbridge police station. Nobody moved. The stench of old coffee and cheap disinfectant filled the still air. Yellowed community flyers fluttered faintly on a nearby bulletin board as the AC kicked on, humming like it didn't know what had just happened. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She stood completely still. Only her shoulders shifted slightly, stiffening, not retreating. Officer Kevin Rohr stood behind the front desk, breathing heavily, gripping the crushed plastic water bottle like it had done something wrong. His eyes, red-rimmed and narrow, stared at her with a sick mix of disgust and pride, as if he'd just taught someone a lesson. "I told you to get out," he barked again, louder this time. "This ain't your playground. Go back to wherever you came from, girl." His voice, laced with power and entitlement, rolled across the room like a slap, but she still said nothing. Several people sitting on the blue chairs along the wall froze in place, their eyes wide, their mouths slightly parted. One woman clutched her purse tighter. A man held his phone, recording but unsure whether to keep filming or look away. Near the printer station, a young white officer looked up from his stack of papers, uncertain, pale, but didn't move, didn't speak. She slowly raised her chin. Water trailed down her cheekbones. Her eyes, once hidden beneath her cap's brim, now stared directly at Officer Rohr. Sharp, focused, deadly calm. He didn't know it, but his entire world was already unraveling. She took a breath, slow, deliberate, and when she spoke, her voice was like a blade wrapped in velvet. "My kind?" she repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "What exactly do you mean by that, officer?" The silence in the room cracked. A low gasp somewhere from the corner. Rohr blinked. For the first time, he hesitated. "Don't play games with me," he snapped, but his voice wasn't as steady as before. "You heard me. We've got real people coming in here with real problems. You want attention? Go yell at your landlord or whatever. This is a police department, not a babysitter's office." Her eyes never moved. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" she asked softly. "Looking for attention?" Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was something in her tone, steel behind silk, that made even the ceiling lights seem dimmer. The kind of voice that didn't need to yell to be heard. The kind of voice you listened to even when you didn't want to. Rohr opened his mouth, then shut it again. Behind her, a chair creaked as someone slowly leaned forward, sensing something was happening. Something big. Something dangerous. She looked around the lobby for a moment. Slowly. One face at a time. Every civilian. Every officer. She saw them all. And they saw her. No one knew who she was. But they were about to find out. When her gaze returned to Officer Rohr, her expression hadn't changed. But her energy had. He felt it, deep in his chest. The way a man feels thunder right before it breaks. And for the first time since she walked in, Rohr looked nervous. She took one small step closer to the desk, not threatening, not aggressive, just steady. "I came here for help," she said quietly. "I asked politely. I waited. You threw water on me." She glanced down at her soaked shirt, then back up. "And now," she added, her voice suddenly colder than the water dripping from her sleeves, "I'm going to make sure you never do that to anyone else again." The bottle in Roar's hand slipped slightly. His fingers tightened, but his grip wasn't sure anymore. The room stayed silent. The young officer by the copier finally looked away, unable to watch what he somehow knew would come next. She wasn't just some woman anymore. She was something else. And Officer Roar? He had no idea what kind of storm he had just unleashed. 1 week earlier, the city of Sterling had buzzed with quiet anticipation. Something had changed, not in a loud, celebratory way, but in whispers that moved through precincts, council halls, and late-night newsrooms. A new chief of police had been sworn in. Isabella Morrow, 41, African-American, former patrol officer turned reform leader. She wasn't just promoted, she was chosen, handpicked by a city desperate for a reset after too many years of racial tensions, excessive force headlines, and lawsuits that never should have existed in the first place. She'd come from the East Coast, another department riddled with scandal where she'd torn out the rot from the roots. And now Sterling wanted her to do the same. But Morrow wasn't the type to walk in and hold a press conference with empty promises. She didn't believe in pamphlets or sugar-coated speeches. She believed in truth, in unfiltered reality. And to get that, she had to go underground. She'd seen it before, how officers changed their tone the moment a superior walked in, how smiles got wider, how the disrespect vanished behind badges and titles. She didn't want a tour. She wanted the truth. And the truth required silence, shadows, and plain clothes. She sat alone in her apartment the night before her first surprise visit, staring at her open closet. Her tailored uniforms hung neatly, polished boots below, medals tucked in a velvet box on the top shelf. But she didn't reach for any of them. Instead, she grabbed a pair of worn blue jeans, a gray shirt with no logo, and a faded baseball cap from a trip she barely remembered. Her hair, normally tied tight behind her head, was pulled into a low bun and tucked beneath the cap. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't wear her badge. She didn't carry anything but her ID, which she hoped she wouldn't need. To the world, she would become Maya Jones. Just another tired black woman walking into a police station looking for help. And her first target? Westbridge Station, the same station with the most civilian complaints in the entire department. Reports of verbal abuse, disrespect, dismissals. A few of the cases even hinted at racial bias, but none stuck. There was one name that came up again and again. Officer Kevin Roar, mid-40s, desk duty, 10 years at the same station. Outspoken, short-tempered, and described by one internal note as the kind of guy who believes the problem is always someone else's fault. Morrow knew that name. She'd read every file, every excuse, every complaint swept under the rug. And now she was going to meet him. Not as his superior, not as Chief Morrow, but as the kind of woman he didn't think mattered. She borrowed an older Toyota Camry from a friend, left the official SUV behind. No security, no assistance, just her, the city map, and her mind set on justice. She parked 3 blocks away from Westbridge, walked with the crowd, blended into the background. Just another face. She'd even practiced her story the night before. A neighbor. Loud noise. Threats when she complained. Wants to file for a temporary restraining order. Needs a police report first. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed emergency. Just enough to require attention. And test how seriously he took her. As she stepped up to the worn glass doors of the station, she paused. Looked at her reflection. Not a chief, not a leader, not a woman with decades of command in her voice. Just Maya Jones. And that's exactly how he'd see her. The plan was simple. Walk in, ask for help, watch, listen, feel the temperature in the room. She wanted to see what it was like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be talked down to, like so many black women had reported before. And if Roar failed that test, she'd make sure he never wore that badge again. The moment she stepped through the doors of Westbridge Station, the energy shifted. It wasn't the kind of place that welcomed strangers. Fluorescent lights flickered slightly. The air smelled like printer toner, old takeout, and something colder, like distrust that had settled into the walls over time. Behind the scratched plexiglass window, Officer Kevin Roar sat slouched in his chair, munching on sunflower seeds and half-scrolling through his phone. She approached slowly, keeping her voice calm. Polite. Measured. "Good morning. I need to file a police report. I was told this was the place." He didn't look up. She waited a second. Then another. Finally, Roar glanced her way, chewing loud. His eyes scanned her. First the cap, then her skin, then the worn jeans. He didn't even bother to hide it. "What kind of report?" he asked, voice flat, uninterested. "My neighbor's been harassing me," she replied. "Threats, mostly verbal, but loud, aggressive. I've got a child at home. I want to file something in case it escalates. I'd like to apply for a restraining order." Roar let out a sarcastic chuckle. "You people and your drama," he muttered under his breath. She tilted her head slightly, catching the words. "Excuse me?" He stood up, dusted seed shells off his shirt, and walked around the counter like he had all day to waste. "Lady, look, I've got real reports to file," he said. "Not here for baby mama fights or neighbor shouting matches. We don't do daycare drama." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. "Where's your proof? Got bruises? Damage? Threats in writing? If not, this ain't worth my time." "I didn't come here to be judged," she said quietly. "You came here," he cut her off, "to waste my morning. Look around. Does it look like I've got time for make-believe threats? If every noise complaint turned into paperwork, we'd be drowning." He walked back to the desk, grabbed a clipboard, and slammed it down in front of her. "Here," he snapped. "Fill this. Maybe someone will look at it next week." She didn't move. He leaned forward. "What's the problem? You need help writing?" A couple of people in the lobby turned to look. One man shook his head in disgust. Another woman whispered to her daughter, telling her to stay quiet. Still, she said nothing. Roar leaned closer. "What's your name again?" "Maya Jones." He rolled his eyes. "Of course it is." She stared straight at him. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor." That did it. His smirk fell into a scowl. "You think I'm scared of a complaint?" he barked. "You think this is the first time someone like you tried to play that game with me?" "I don't know," she replied evenly. "Is it? You people always think someone owes you something. Like respect is just handed out." He took a step forward. "Here's the truth. In this station, you get what you earn." She didn't blink. "Then I'd like to see the badge number of the man who just denied my right to file a report." "Badge number?" he said mockingly, spinning in a half circle. "Lady, this ain't a movie. This is real life. And in real life, if you walk in here acting like you own the place, someone needs to remind you. You don't." He grabbed a water bottle off the desk. "I should cool you down before you embarrass yourself further." The bottle lifted slightly in his hand, and at that moment, time seemed to slow. Everyone in the lobby turned to look. The young officer near the hallway took one step forward, then stopped. The man filming earlier raised his phone again. Morrow stayed still. She didn't speak, didn't step back. The bottle was still sealed. Rohr looked at it, then at her, then at the people watching. And in that instant, something toxic twisted inside him. Pride, power, racism, all crashing into one reckless act. With a flick of his wrist, he twisted the cap, took 2 fast steps forward, and raised the bottle. This wasn't a dismissal anymore. It was a warning, one he'd never get the chance to take back. The bottle cracked open with a hiss, and the cold stream hit her scalp like a slap from the sky. The sound echoed louder than it should have, like a violent insult shouted in church. Everyone in the room froze, not just from shock, but from the weight of something irreversible. Her gray cap darkened instantly. The water flowed down her shoulders and chest, soaking the thin cotton shirt until it clung to her frame. Drops splattered on the tile floor, one by one, in a rhythm that felt like judgment. Officer Rohr stood back, chest puffed, lips curled in triumph. The plastic bottle hung loosely in his hand, now empty. His expression was clear. He thought he'd won, that he'd proven something, that this woman, this black woman, had been put in her place. But she didn't look small. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't move a muscle. Instead, she slowly raised both hands and slid the wet cap off her head. Her hair, tightly braided and pinned, shimmered with droplets. Her eyes lifted, finally, fully, and met his like a slow, rising storm. The shift was instant, subtle, but devastating. Something changed in the air. The people watching felt it too. The man recording stepped closer. The young officer by the copier lowered his hands. A woman near the wall pressed her hand to her chest. Because now, it wasn't just some lady with a complaint. She was someone else entirely. She pulled a laminated ID badge from the inside of her soaked shirt and held it out. Steady, deliberate. "I'm Isabella Morrow," she said, her voice low but cutting through the room like a judge's gavel. "Chief of Police, Sterling Division." The words crashed into the silence like thunder. Officer Rohr blinked. Once. Then again. "No," he said quietly. She took one step forward. "Yes." His grip on the bottle tightened, then loosened. He looked around, suddenly aware of the faces staring at him. Some stunned, some horrified, some filming. The power he had just a minute ago now drained from him like the last drops from that bottle. He stammered. "You can't just walk in here pretending to be—" "I didn't pretend," she interrupted. "You assumed. That's on you." He tried to speak again, but his voice cracked in his throat. "I came here," she continued, "as a citizen, as a woman reporting a safety concern. You ignored me, then mocked me, then degraded me in front of witnesses. And then," she glanced down at her soaked body, "you assaulted me." "You don't understand," he said, now stepping back. "I understand perfectly," she said. "I've been studying your file for weeks." His eyes widened. "Yes, your file," she said, advancing another step. "You've been shielded for years, dozens of complaints, all buried. They said you were too careful, that there wasn't enough to fire you. But what you did just now?" She gestured toward her soaked shirt. "That was reckless. That was public. That was a man who thought no one important would ever challenge him. She turned to the rest of the room. Is anyone here willing to step forward as a witness? Hands went up. A voice spoke out. I got it all on camera. Another, he's always like this. Always. Roar stumbled back. Wait, I didn't know who you were. And that's the problem, she said, locking eyes with him. Because if I wasn't who I am, I'd still be walking out of here, soaked, humiliated, and ignored. You treat people like garbage when you think they have no power. But today, you guessed wrong. She turned to the young officer frozen in place. Get his badge and weapon. Now! The rookie moved fast, almost grateful to act. Roar didn't resist. His hands trembled as he unhooked the badge from his chest and placed the firearm on the desk. Every eye in the room followed him. There was no ceremony, no defense, just silence. Morrow stood there, water dripping from her elbows. Not a hint of anger on her face, only purpose. She faced him one last time. You're suspended immediately, pending formal review. You'll be escorted off the premises, and if you try to twist this narrative, don't bother. We have cameras, witnesses, and your own ego as evidence. Roar's lips moved, but no sound came out. She leaned in, inches from his face. I was going to clean this department from the top down, she whispered. Turns out, I only had to stand still and let the filth show itself. She stepped back, nodded at the young officer, and turned. As she walked toward the exit, her soaked shoes squeaked on the tile. But the sound was softer than the silence that followed. The front doors opened, and the hallway outside filled with whispers before Isabella Morrow even stepped out. Word traveled fast, faster than protocol, faster than reports. What happened in that lobby wasn't just a moment. It was a message. The kind of moment that hit the streets before it hit the system. By the time Officer Kevin Roar was escorted out, badge clipped, gun surrendered, and face drained of blood, 3 local news vans were already parked across the street. Cell phone footage was uploading to Twitter and YouTube under titles like Racist Cop Attacks Woman Gets Instant Justice and Black Woman Poured On Reveals She's Chief. It took only minutes to explode. Inside the station, nobody spoke. They just watched. Roar didn't say a word. Not during the escort, not during the suspension, not even when a civilian yelled from the sidewalk, "How's it feel now, tough guy?" His silence wasn't strength. It was fear. And Isabella? She didn't raise her voice once. She simply walked out the way she walked in, head high, steady, soaked to her skin, and unshaken. Outside, a group had already gathered, some curious, some outraged. A few even clapped as she stepped down the station stairs. But Morrow didn't acknowledge them. She wasn't there for applause. She was there for change. A junior officer rushed up beside her, breathing fast. "Chief, should we notify command or wait for?" "Already done," she replied. "They'll be here within the hour. Start prepping an internal memo for full review." "Yes, ma'am." "And call civilian oversight. They're going to want statements, video evidence, everything." The officer nodded and ran back inside. Behind her, someone asked, "Can we speak with you, Chief Morrow?" "Just one statement for the public." She turned slightly, just enough for the cameras to see her face, water still dripping from her braids. "I didn't come here for politics," she said. "I came for accountability. And you all just witnessed exactly why we need it." That was the quote that would loop for days. Inside the precinct, the shift was seismic. Some officers were rattled, others relieved. There were whispers about who might be next, whose record might not survive the coming storm. Because it was a storm. Not loud, not fast, but relentless. Within hours, Morrow's office issued a public statement confirming the suspension, citing officer misconduct, abuse of authority, and violation of ethical standards. It named no names, but everyone knew. The mayor's office released a message of support. The city council called for an emergency oversight session. And somewhere, in a dim apartment, a young black mother who had once walked into the same station and been laughed at, replayed the video on her phone, smiling through tears. Justice didn't usually look like this, but today it had. Roar, meanwhile, was taken to a side building, stripped of gear, seated in a holding office to await formal HR processing. The badge that once gave him unchecked power now sat in a plain evidence bag, unshined, forgotten. He stared at the floor. His knees bounced. He muttered once, didn't know who she was. But it didn't matter. He knew what he did. And worse, so did everyone else. Back in her temporary office, Morrow dried her hands slowly. The borrowed clothes would have to wait. A clean blazer hung on the chair behind her, untouched. She stared at the monitor showing the lobby camera footage, now frozen on the exact frame where the water hit her head. She didn't smile. She just leaned forward and whispered to herself, "No more silence." The door opened slightly. "Chief? Come in." "We've collected 6 eyewitness statements. 3 video clips already confirmed." "Good," she said. "I want every piece of it cataloged. We're not burying anything." The officer nodded. "There's a crowd outside. Media, protesters, supporters. It's growing." She nodded. "Let it grow. Let them all see what justice looks like. When it doesn't flinch." The internal affairs meeting was scheduled within 24 hours. That never happened. Not in a department known for dragging its feet. But the video had done its job. It didn't just expose an officer. It exposed a culture. At the head of a long, dark wood table sat Isabella Morrow, now in her formal uniform. Her cap rested neatly beside her files. A small microphone blinked red in front of her. The room was packed with suits, badges, and silence. The footage played on a monitor. Everyone watched the moment. The water. The silence. The reveal. No one spoke during playback. Even the ones who might have once defended Roar looked away. Morrow didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, not for drama, not for effect, but to remind them all this was no longer hearsay. This was reality, documented, shared, seen. When the video ended, she closed the folder in front of her. "We've ignored warning signs for years," she said, "but this time, the proof didn't come from a complaint form. It came from a hallway full of people with cell phones and courage." One of the supervisors cleared his throat. "The footage, it's clear. There's no room for reinterpretation." Morrow nodded. "And we shouldn't try to reinterpret anything. What happened wasn't just misconduct. It was a man comfortable enough in his racism to act like that in public." Another officer at the table added, "His history matches. He's had more flagged civilian complaints than any officer here. But each time, there was just enough gray area to avoid formal discipline." "Not anymore," she said. "The gray is gone." The suspension was upgraded to a formal investigation, a public one. The city attorney released a statement supporting transparency. A press conference was scheduled for the end of the week. Roar's name was trending online, not with sympathy, but with fury. But Isabella didn't stop there. In her office that night, she drafted something new, a mandatory bias reform protocol aimed at every officer who had even one prior complaint tied to race, gender, or language. It wasn't just about punishing Rohr. It was about changing the blueprint. The protocol included 3 stages. Stage 1, education. Not the generic slideshow kind. A full curriculum built with civil rights experts, trauma counselors, and actual community members sharing stories of being ignored, profiled, or mocked, like she had been. Stage 2, immersion. Officers would attend courtrooms, ride-alongs in different districts, and even visit community centers anonymously. To see, not as law enforcers, but as silent observers, how mistrust grows. Stage 3, accountability. Regular evaluations, surprise audits, real consequences. Not for mistakes, but for patterns. Rohr was placed on unpaid leave while the investigation continued, but he'd also be offered enrollment in the new program. Not because he deserved it, but because change didn't mean revenge. It meant accountability, followed by opportunity to grow, or be removed. In the days that followed, the department began to shift. Whispers turned into questions. Questions turned into conversations. And conversations, slowly, turned into change. Some officers pushed back, complained it was too much. Others, especially those newer to the force, leaned in. They'd seen the footage. They didn't want to be next. And Morrow? She showed up to every meeting, every training, every audit. She didn't hide behind rank. She stood in it. One afternoon, while reviewing files, she found an email from an officer she didn't know well. Young, Hispanic, 2 years on the job. It read, "Chief Morrow, I just want you to know. What you did last week gave people like me hope. Not just because Rohr was exposed, but because we finally saw someone who didn't just talk about change. You showed it. Thank you." She closed the email. She didn't smile. But something inside her settled. This wasn't over. But it had begun. Weeks passed. The firestorm faded from headlines, but not from memory. The video still lived online, shared, commented, embedded in classrooms, forums, and community spaces. It wasn't viral anymore. It was archived, studied, referenced. It had become a case study in how racism operates, not just in the shadows, but in plain sight, and how it can be crushed, quietly, professionally, permanently. Officer Kevin Rohr's investigation concluded with overwhelming evidence. Witness statements, video footage, complaint history. It was the kind of case no lawyer could twist into misunderstanding. He resigned before termination. No farewell. No badge ceremony. Just a printed email, a signature, and a walk out the back door with no applause, no uniform, and no legacy. The department didn't celebrate. It restructured. Morrow watched it all with quiet focus. She didn't post victory messages. She didn't grant exclusive interviews. She went to work. A new policy now required officers with public-facing roles to undergo quarterly evaluations. Community liaisons were added to precincts. Bias training became mandatory, not as punishment, but as qualification. The city felt the shift, slowly, unevenly, but it was there. And Rohr? He was seen once, months later, attending one of the therapy groups required under the reform program. Not as an officer. Just a man in a folding chair, listening to stories of pain, some almost identical to the one he caused. He never said a word, just sat with his jaw tight and his eyes down. Whether he changed or not, was never Morrow's concern. That wasn't the mission. The mission was making sure the next black woman who walked into that lobby wouldn't be treated like she didn't belong. One rainy Friday, Morrow returned to the same station, this time unannounced. She wore no uniform, no badge on display. The lobby looked the same, chipped tiles, buzzing lights, but it felt different. A young white officer stood behind the counter. He looked up, made eye contact, and said, "Good morning. How can I help you today, ma'am?" She paused, just for a second, then replied, "No report. Just visiting." He smiled nervously, still unsure who she was, but respectful. As she turned to leave, she noticed a new poster on the bulletin board near the chairs. It read, "Respect isn't earned, it's required." Chief Isabella Morrow. She hadn't approved that quote. Probably something her office put together for public morale. But she didn't mind. It was true. Outside, the rain hit her coat in soft taps. Across the street, a black teenager sat on the bus stop bench, watching a video on his phone. She could hear the faint audio. It was the same clip. The water. The silence. The reveal. He didn't notice her. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched as he pulled his hoodie tighter and shook his head at the video. Disgusted. Empowered. He tapped to replay it. Morrow turned and walked away. No cameras, no crowd. Just her and the weight of what had changed, and what still needed to. And as she walked, every step whispered a message louder than any press release ever could. Change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks in soaking wet and walks out without ever raising its voice.